And we now welcome in the new head coach of VCU, Phil Martelli Jr. And Phil, welcome. What is it like to be introduced as the VCU head coach?
Yeah, it's still a little bit surreal. I keep saying I've dreamt big dreams in this. I wanted to be a Division I head coach since I was probably 11, 12 years old. But to be at a program that is one of the top, probably 20, 25, 30 jobs in the country is still a little hard to believe, especially, it was not a meteoric rise as an assistant, but then in these last 2 or 3 years, it's kind of felt like that. So, I still pinch myself. I still walk into this facility every day going like, this is pretty crazy.
Well, that rolls into my next question. 2 years ago, you were not a Division I head coach, and now you're the head coach at VCU. How do you explain your own meteoric rise as a head coach?
Well, I've been around really good people. I was around great people at Bryant, Bill Smith, our athletic director there, Ross Cattell, our president, Ron Makeley, the previous president. I mean, those people set me up for success. And then you factor in having great players, which we did, the Earl Timberlakes, the Sharif Gross Bullocks, the Rafael Pinzones, and, go down the line, Barry Evans, all those guys. That was, our success was because of them. And then just being ready, like you never know when that time's going to come. And I've been fortunate to work for some really good people and work with some really good people that, put me in those positions every day to have to make decisions and have to think like a head coach for at least the last probably 10 years. So then when that opportunity came and that day came, just kind of ready to roll with it.
Could you imagine undertaking all the responsibility that you're undertaking now at VCU if you didn't have the experience for a couple of years of running your own program at Bryant?
No, I don't think I think you have to go through the steps that you go through. And that was part of it, right? Like making those decisions on that level, having to deal with the things you deal with on that level. And then, okay, now this is a different beast. Like your time is pulled in many different directions. Staff wise, there was 4 of us at Bryant, in a tiny little office. Now we have, I have to get on a motorized scooter some days to just go down the hall to go see somebody because that, spread out. But, it's a lot of different people. You're managing different people. But at the end of the day, the managing people part stays the same. And I think staying true to who you are is a big deal. And these last 2 years at Bryant really helped me kind of solidify who I am and who I always wanted to be as a coach.
So you lose to Michigan State in the first round of the NCAA tournament, and then a couple of days later, you get the VCU job. What happened in between?
Yeah, it was man, I wish I even knew. I feel like I blinked and I was on a plane to Richmond with my family. So we lost. We came back that Saturday, flew back. There were some other opportunities and people that were talking to me that I was supposed to set up meetings with. So it was kind of doing that. It was really, to be honest with you, I was focused on Bryant, and the transfer portal was opening Monday. There were some guys we knew were going to be in there that I'm like, all right, we need to make sure we're setting up times to connect with them. And really that was my focus. And then really what the future would look like at Bryant, obviously looking for contract extensions and improvements to the program and things like that. So I was really putting those lists together that Saturday and Sunday. And then I was sitting, waiting for a meeting up there with my athletic director. And I got a text that said, be ready to go here. You could be a serious candidate. And before I knew it, I was, and they were flying up to see me. And the news broke that I took the job without even ever having met with them yet. So that flipped my Tuesday night upside down. But by Wednesday, late morning, early afternoon, it was solidified.
So when you become the VCU head coach, you join a very, very special fraternity because this job has been a launch pad for so many special head coaches: Jeff Capel, Anthony Grant, Shaka Smart, Will Wade, Mike Rhodes, now Ryan Odom, who's the head coach at Virginia. How many of those guys have you reached out to, and what's the dialogue been like among the former VCU head coaches?
Yeah, I haven't had enough time to get extensive conversations with them. That's something that's been high on my list. I feel like every week, and then with trying to get guys to come back and then recruit a team and all that. But I've had, some dialogue with Ryan, more probably with him, with Mike, we had talked, Shaka, I had some text conversation with him. Will, I ran into at the Final Four and told him that I'd want to talk at some point in time. So, I haven't had a ton of time, but I'm hoping that that's coming up here soon because I want to get all those guys, and Jeff Capel and Anthony Grant, although obviously in league, I'm sure Coach Grant will not be as forthcoming with the secrets, but guys that I have had tremendous respect for, that not just have won, but have done this in a way that's respectable and classy and all those kind of things. And that's what I'm excited. I'm excited to kind of connect with them and just say, look, what are your thoughts? What was good? What wasn't while you were here? And, try to make this the best it can be.
Phil, your father was obviously Phil Martelli Jr. when you were growing up, or Phil Martelli Sr. when you were growing up, and a very, very successful head coach at St. Joe's. And, you're his son, and a lot of people look at you and say, well, this is somebody whose father was an institution, this profession, but you haven't been handed anything in your own quest to be a head coach. And as a matter of fact, less than a decade ago, you were out of college basketball and you were an assistant in the G League. What was that period like?
Well, that was an interesting time because we win the CAA championship at Delaware. The next 2 years were tumultuous is probably the best word I can put it. More off the court with just some kind of hierarchy stuff that was above my head. And then it ultimately leads to us getting fired. And that was hard because, you go through that process and I look back on that and say that really was one of the best things that could happen to me. I just learned so much about the business from being fired and going through that, kind of learning like this is the real part of the business, right? Like it's easy to go and we win and we do this and we do that, but to learn like who your true friends are in the business. There's people that I thought were real friends that I never heard from, and there was guys that I barely knew that I heard from all the time. So that opened my eyes to that part of the business. But it really turned out to be a blessing because the opportunities I had were not great as an assistant. Places that one coach was on his last legs, another was just geographically didn't make sense. So I did at that time the D League, now the G League. So that set me up for this day and age of college basketball. One, it gave me a PhD in X's and O's. I mean, that was like a whole different level. The things we were teaching and talking about was at another level from anything that I had been around. But two was the roster management piece, which is very much like that. What we went through is very much what it is now in college basketball. Quick decisions, quick evaluations. How's this guy fit? Does he make sense? I tell people all the time, we played 50 games. We had 31 different guys play for us in 50 games. So getting guys acclimated and trying to build a bond quickly really set me up. And the connections I made there, through other people I worked with, through NBA personnel, agents, former players, the whole thing, I'm still using those today.
Well, adversity, no doubt, in life reveals character, and that's obviously what you went through during that period when you were out of college basketball. And I know it was very, very emotional for your family a couple of years ago when your father was removed from his position at St. Joe's. And I'm curious, now that you're a head coach in the Atlantic 10, what is it going to be like for you emotionally to be leading another program in the upcoming season against St. Joe's, which isn't only obviously the place that your father used to coach, but it's your alma mater as well?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't thought much about that specifically, but being in the Atlantic 10 means so much to me. When I was growing up, Atlantic 10 basketball was college basketball, and yeah, there's people that followed the Big East at that time, or the ACC, and those conferences were great. But to me, I was like the Atlantic 10, those moments, those games, whether it be on campus or be at the Palestra for the A10 tournament when that was there, or the Spectrum, I mean, I go back, some of my fondest memories in college basketball are those games. And you will know this. There's probably a lot of your listeners that don't know this, but I go back to the days of Penn State in the Atlantic 10 and Rutgers in the Atlantic 10 and West Virginia in the Atlantic 10. And not to mention obviously Temple and their run and UMass and their run, like growing up with that and seeing that literally from the sideline every day gives me goosebumps. Like I think about those days and with such fondness and have such admiration for all those coaches that came before, all those players that came before, that did special things in the Atlantic 10.
Well, that brings me now to my next point, because the Atlantic 10 just 11 years ago had 6 teams in the NCAA tournament, and 12 years ago in 2013 had 5 teams in the NCAA tournament. But the league now has struggled and has had to scratch and claw to get multiple teams in the NCAA tournament. There's a good chance if VCU did not win the Atlantic 10 tournament title game that it would have missed the NCAA tournament. How in this climate does the Atlantic 10 get fixed?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's one that a lot of people have been trying to answer over the years, these last couple of years. I don't know how the league as a whole gets fixed. I just know from our perspective that we have to do everything in our power. One, we have to recruit a certain level to make sure that we have a chance to have an at-large if we don't win the league. And we have to schedule that way and have to know the formula and go through it. And we have, in painstaking fashion, we've broken down everything. And they had done this prior to me getting here, so that, we just have added to going through and figuring out, okay, the teams like us that have gotten, those at-larges, what did they do? What are the things we can do? Okay, who fits in these different buckets, and try to schedule that way, to make sure that we're there, and it comes down to having a good enough team and then, putting yourself in that position. And I think they've done a pretty decent job of that here, and that's something that we want to try and continue to do.
So for 25-26 for your non-league schedule, you got 3 games in the battle for Atlantis. You got New Mexico at home. Is there anything else of significance on the docket for VCU in year 1 under Phil Martelli Jr.?
We're getting close. I can't officially say it yet, but there's a chance that we're playing a former coach here who may happen to be a new coach in the ACC. We may be locking them in. Nothing is contracted yet, but seems like they're gracious enough to play us. So, we'll get that locked in. We're going to have, by all accounts, our first game in Atlantis will be a pretty high level game. And then, working on it. We got a couple neutral site opportunities, a couple potential road Power 4 game opportunities, trying to add, again, back to that formula, trying to add those quad 1 games. Unfortunately, we don't get enough of them in conference play, but if we can add them in the non-conference. So that's really been a focus. And then, rounding out the home schedule, we have American at home, and we'll get a few more locked in as we go along.
Now, as part of the VCU head coach buyout, if a head coach leaves VCU as part of the buyout, that coach is required to come back and play a game. Mike Rhodes was obviously the head coach before Ryan Odom. He's the head coach at Penn State right now. Are there any plans to play Penn State next season in Richmond?
I don't know that. That one's over my head, so I don't know. That was being dealt with, I think, at an administrative level, so I don't know that for sure.
Okay. Well, Phil Martelli Jr. shedding some light here on the VCU non-conference schedule. Phil, when you look at the roster that you've put together so far at VCU, and I know it's still only May, what are your initial impressions?
Yeah, I mean, we targeted certain guys. We always talk about trying to be intentional going into the portal. I don't want to be diving into that transfer portal pool. It's so crowded now. When we started doing it years ago, it was, you could maneuver in there, and now you dive in there and everybody's in there. So the thing that I always say is I don't want to be in there playing Marco Polo. I don't want to dive into that pool, close my eyes, yell Marco. All right, John yells Polo. Okay, he's our guy, and just piece it together that way. Like, I want to be intentional with what we're doing and who we're taking and how it fits. Efficiency really matters to me. So all the guys that we've signed, fit that mold. It was, okay, we need this position. Okay, who's the most efficient offensive and defensive player we can get at that position? Okay, boom, and then we were able to do that across the board. So, I think we have a lineup that can really guard, 1 through 5. We were very switchable last year at Bryant. We can do some of that. I don't know if we'll do exactly that. A lot of that will be dictated by the personnel, but we have a lineup that I think can really guard. And I think we have offensive pieces that really fit together well in our system and then amongst each other.
Now, 3 of the guys that you took out of the transfer portal, Ahmed Noel from UConn, Jadrian Tracy from Oregon, and also Tyrell Ward from LSU. These guys are all former top 100 prospects who played at the power conference level. How much could that be a philosophy moving forward for VCU? Because you have the brand, you have obviously the NIL resources to attract maybe the power conference freshman or sophomore that didn't get the same bite of the apple that he was hoping to get at the higher level.
Yeah, I like that model. Similar to what we did at Bryant. We tried to find those lower end rotation Atlantic 10 guys, the Barry Evans, Rafael Pinzon came from St. John's, Earl Timberlake came from Memphis. Like, find those guys that, all right, aren't quite getting the opportunity they want at that level. They come down, and not just us. There was other teams in America East that did that and had guys that had a lot of success. So, that's something for me and for us as our program. Like, we'll look at that, and because of our geographic location, you have those DMV guys that want to come back to the area. Maybe they don't want to be right there in DC, but they can come back here. You're an hour and a half from home, playing high level basketball, with an incredible, fan base and support. So those things will continue. That's something that we will look at, especially guys that are coming from winning. All those guys came from winning programs, came from excellent coaching. So they know what it takes. They know what it takes to play on that level. They understand the commitment. They understand the expectation. They understand that the eyeballs are always on you, which they are here. And they don't get flustered by that.
Phil, final thing, we've obviously seen more and more the focus be on programs and power conferences in this climate of college athletics, but there are a certain number of programs, Gonzaga, St. Mary's, VCU, Memphis, who stand out outside, the power conference structure. Obviously throw San Diego State in there as well. How do you keep VCU elite in this current climate?
Well, we have to continue to win. We have to continue to put ourselves on the biggest stages, and not shy from that, and whatever that looks like. If it's, hey, there's an opportunity to play on national TV against, one of the best teams in the country, yeah, we're there, and doing those things. Again, continuing to recruit at a high level, but continuing to put yourself out there, in those situations, and then continuing to win, like that. Every school you mentioned wins. They go to the NCAA tournament year after year after year. So that's something that we have to make sure that is a staple, and it's not just they were good 5 years ago. And then, no, we have to be, continuously good and be consistent with that.
Phil, congratulations on the gig. Great visiting with you. Thrilled for your success. And as always, look forward to staying connected along the way.
Thanks, John. Appreciate you.
That's it. That's VCU head coach Phil Martelli Jr. I'm John Rothstein. We'll be back after this.